Okay, I know a lot of you guys aren't going to take me seriously after that jump, but I just thought it would be cool to enter into the film. So, let's get right to it. When was the last time you really looked at something? And I mean really looked at it. Like you weren't thinking about anything else. You were not interpreting what it was. You just looked at it. You saw it for what it was, and there was no thinking behind it. There was just seeing. There was just watching. That's the essence of what I think is the key to success. And that key is paying attention. I'll tell you more. Okay, so for the past 5 years, I've been really stuck in my head. And not necessarily being a bad thing, I've learned a lot of concepts, little mental tools and ideas to use to get me about my life. And through the process of thinking on and on and on, and filling up notebooks and spending days writing in bed or in my room, just trying to understand the way the world worked from a conceptual perspective. I've kind of come to a middle ground, somewhere in between making analytical decisions about how to live my life and not thinking at all. And that middle ground is being present. It's paying attention. And so I feel like a lot of the reason why we fail to live happy and successful lives is because we're on either end of the spectrum. We're not balanced. And that spectrum is either being too tense, too stuck in your head, too analytical, and the other side is not thinking at all, running away from anything that makes you tense. Maybe taking too many drugs, or being completely and utterly reckless, and just seeking pleasure in life. The basic pleasures. Not anything higher, not anything meaningful. What is meaningful ends up being what's in between. A proper balance. And let me explain why this balance is important and why paying attention is at the center of it. So coming from my perspective, always trying to find conceptual, dogmatic ways to power through life, I would often come up with rules that I would assume would apply to the entirety of my life, and I would live by them, maybe for a day or a couple days until I get hit and I make a mistake, and the rule that I was working to use seemed wrong at the time. Maybe it would only work for a couple days, and then after that, something would just seem off. It wouldn't seem to be true any longer. And let me give you an example of that. Just recently, I was trying to understand how to live the most joyful life and how to overcome your fears. I came to the conclusion after a lot of thought that I should just ignore the things that I'm afraid of and focus on the things that make me happy. And I have had this perspective before when I was 17, 16 years old, climbing rooftops in New York City. Because I had lived a life with so much pain when I was a teenager, my idea was that I was just going to dive in to the things that made me happy, the things that I was passionate about, without any consideration of the negative effects it could possibly have on me or on others, because that small chance at a life of positivity that I could foreseeably achieve by just taking a leap of faith was so much more worth living a life of pain. I only saw those two extremes. And so then, and just recently, I wasn't aware of the balance. I wasn't aware of the balance that was necessary between pursuing the things that are meaningful to you and taking the proper precautions. But when you're stuck in your head and you want to use a dogmatic concept to validate either one or the other extreme side of the spectrum, you absolutely can justify it with words. And this is the problem of being stuck in your head. So I could easily just say, ignore your fears and pursue the things that make you happy, because it's the constraints that you put on yourself through fear that get in the way of all the happiness in your life, that get in the way of all the meaning in your life. And that sounds true on the surface, but to a very valuable extent, we have our limits, we have our fears, because if we don't box ourselves in to a certain degree, if we don't put a limit on what could potentially be reckless behavior, we can end up hurting ourselves, killing ourselves, hurting other people. And this is what happened when I was climbing rooftops in New York City. I wasn't thinking about the potential legal risks. I knew the physical risks, and I was definitely considerate of that. But the risk of going to jail wasn't a concept to me. It was so much more worthwhile taking that risk and hopefully, potentially coming out on the other side with enough of an audience, enough of a foundation to go travel and climb rooftops and explore the world and do everything that I could potentially see as making me happy if I were able to just take that initial risk and be completely ignorant of the consequences. In hindsight, that ended up being an excuse for me not to do the actual difficult work of getting to that place I wanted to be in the most balanced and efficient way. So I was on one side of the spectrum. Be reckless. Don't think about your limitations and just power through to what makes you happy. And oftentimes we find ourselves on the other side of the spectrum. Hold yourself back because you could get hurt. Be a little tense. Dive into situations. Don't do the things that you know you should be doing because something bad could happen to you. You could embarrass yourself. You could get hurt. We don't believe in our potential because it's easier to be safe. That's holding yourself back too much. That's being too tense instead of letting go. And the only thing that's going to let you find that balance is not thinking. It's not necessarily analysis itself, but it's paying attention. Because when you think, you're stuck in your head. But when you pay attention, you're taking in every single bit of information that your body is receiving. Every single piece of knowledge that your mind has accrued over the years. All of that is pulled together and playing this harmonious song inside your mind that tells you exactly what to do. That's what a gut feeling is. That's how exactly you know you can be doing something wrong without knowing exactly why. What attention is the balance between tension or limitation or chaos, or a better word for that would be unconsciousness. You could think about it in terms of a machine. If the gears get too rusty and tight, it's going to fall apart. If the gears get too loose and unstable, it's also going to fall apart. And we're falling apart all the time, going from too tight to too unstable. This is holding ourselves back from what we're afraid of and what we think is the most meaningful pursuit in our lives, and diving into reckless behavior like getting drunk and even watching hours and hours of online content because it's safe and easy pleasure. We don't have to put ourselves out there. And I'm not going to tell you to ignore your fear anymore. If you really drop into the moment and take into account every little bit of what your eyes are telling you, your ears are telling you, your body is telling you, your mind is telling you, and your heart is telling you, and you just let go, then you'll always make the right decision in the moment. If you're always following that gut feeling, or your heart's calling, or your intuition, whatever word you want to call it, you'll be able to bring yourself back to center. And you'll get your life back. I want to do a PS postscript on that one. A quick reason why dropping in and being present, for you conceptual nerds who want to understand the details or the philosophy behind why I've come to this conclusion. The reason why being present is extremely important, and the way to do it, is because what concepts are manufacturings or creations of the limiting part of your brain. Ideas are boxes. A box is a limitation, and that's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is not thinking at all. But one side, the thinking side, the box side, the making concepts, like using mathematical equations, that's just being too held back. And the other side would be being too chaotic and not thinking at all, not paying any attention whatsoever. And so when you're really in the moment, and you're really pursuing a goal, you do a little bit of both. You let go, and then you receive the feedback, you analyze it, and then you let go into the next thing. And only the present moment is going to be able to take you there. So drop into the present moment, pay attention, be successful, and have a happy life. Thanks for watching.